Welcome to part 31 of Was I in a Cult? So I'm gonna do like a quick timeline. In 1994 is when I started attending the church, and I was involved in a lot of different ministries, and it was kind of like a trying all the ministries year for me. I think I found that I loved evangelism, and so I would go often with the group to go evangelize on Friday nights. And so I was a part of that ministry, and I was also a part of the youth ministry, which met every Wednesday. And I was also attending all the other services like Friday night prayer, Sunday morning, Sunday night, and I was doing follow up on Mondays. So that was like in 1994. And then fast forward to like 1995 is when I really started to begin to step into leadership roles and get a lot of speaking opportunities in the church. So in 1994, I remember that I had mentioned before, I was attending the pastor's daughter and her boyfriend's Bible study, and they were sending me out to start my own Bible study, which happened somewhere at the end of like 1994, the beginning of 1995 or something like that. And so yeah, I started doing my own Bible study at that time, and I think at the same time frame, I started to hang out with another lady that was coming out of the women's home also, because my friend Nani had already left the church. So I remember her and her daughters were no longer coming, and I didn't have like a best friend anymore. So I started hanging out with this lady Grace and her daughters, which was like the same exact scenario. I hung out with her for a period of time. We got really close, and then she left the church. I think it was at that time that I decided that any future friendships that I was going to make, it was going to have to be with someone that had been in the church for a long period of time, and I was no longer going to meet someone or hang out with someone that hadn't actually had years in that church for like me to be their friend, because I was so afraid I was just going to lose more friends. Also I tried to relate to some of the youth and some of the leaders in the youth, and I don't know, there was just like a divide there. Like I just didn't really feel like I related to them quite as much as some of the women that were in the home or leaving the home. Maybe it was because my life came from a complex background, and it was more of like a trauma bond between me and other women that had experienced some of the similar things and gone through similar things and similar traumas growing up and stuff like that. I think it was around this time that I started to fixate on developing a friendship with the lady that I first met when I first walked into the church, who I found out that she was a lesbian, but that she was in the home trying to transform her life and no longer be that. And I was intrigued by her, and I thought it was just because I thought that she was a nice person that I wanted to get to know. I didn't feel like an attraction to her, as far as like, I didn't realize that I had some kind of a lesbian attraction to her. It wasn't like that. It was more like I just really want to be her friend, you know? And I think what happened was in that time period where everyone was going evangelizing, because I would go evangelizing like all the time, every Friday night, and sometimes there were different groups that would go, and then she started to come with the groups because she had graduated the home, and she was in like what they called re-entry, where they weren't in the home and they had a little bit more, because the women in the home had a very structured schedule, and they weren't allowed to like do things in ministry unless they were doing it with the people in the home, and they weren't really allowed to associate with any other members in the church, which is very much a red flag of being a cult too. Is that when they even isolate people within the church and groups within the church, to where the women's home weren't allowed to have any connections or talk to anyone outside of the women's home for the entire year that they had committed themselves to that program of indoctrination. So now Susan had more freedom to actually meet people that were outside of the women's home and hang out with them. And now our conversations could go beyond me just walking up to her and saying hi during service. I mean, even that was kind of taboo. Like, women in the home were not allowed to associate with the church members. Like, you could only talk to women in the home if you were in good standing in the church, because the home director was watching every single one of those women like a hawk. And if anyone that she didn't personally know or approve of came, like, they would not be allowed to associate. And it's like, even when we were doing the greeting, like when everyone said, oh, greet the neighbor or whatever, you know, greet someone, they were only greeting one another within their group where they all sat together. So they were completely held separate from the congregation for the entire year that they were committing themselves to the home. Now, she had graduated and she was now able to talk to people outside of that group. So, and associate a little bit with some members of the church community that were not in the home. So she started coming out evangelizing with the evangelism teams, and we went out a few times as a group. And I remember we were witnessing to, we had specialized groups that would go out and witness specifically to prostitutes, and that was one of our ministries that we did, to where we would go out and we would try to reach them. And you know, again, it was more evangelism, talking about God, but more than anything, inviting them to our church and trying to get them to enter the home. So this was like the home's version of evangelism. They would allow their women that had graduated the home and went into the re-entry program to, under like this guidance and supervision of some leaders that the home director trusted, would allow them to go out and evangelize and witness. And that was more of a call, not just to come to the church, but to come into the women's home. They wanted to get more women into the home, because when they got these women into the home, they were able to tell them that they couldn't work for like the whole entire year. So even if they were working, they couldn't come into the home. They would have to quit their jobs and go on GR, and then they would request that the GR check would be handed over to the you know, home directors, which obviously is fraud and is obviously very illegal, but I still think they get away with it. I don't know how, but that's how they were doing it then. Maybe they've changed things. I don't know. There's a lot of information about it, about the fraud online, and like, it's kind of crazy. I'm not going to go into that because I'm just not. The point is that I was getting to know Susan a lot, and we were becoming closer, and she was even at one point in time, she's like, hey, pick me up and we'll go evangelizing together. And like, so I was starting to give her rides. We would start to hang out and go do some things together. And she was involved in prison ministry, which was something I wasn't aware of, but like, I didn't even know that there was a prison ministry, but she would talk to me about the prison ministry. And so I started to get interested in prison ministry and started going to some of the meetings that they were having, because I thought, oh, this is something that seems interesting to me. Now, she had came from the prison system and went straight into the women's home, and that's one of the way the women's home recruits, is to get people that are already in prison to be to go into their home straight out of the prison, or to come into the streets off drugs or whatever. That's like, they're looking for people that are addicted to bring them into the home and to follow their program. I'm almost out of time, so I don't think I have a lot more time to go on with this story. If your church has these communal homes where they're not allowed to talk to other members of the congregation, and they are not allowed to get a job and have to just be fully indoctrinated by the program alone, it might be a cult. A cult within the cult. more later. Bye.